Dan, welcome to the podcast, man. Glad we can make this happen.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure several people watching and listening know who you are familiar with some of the things that you've done or that you do. But could you give us a little intro about yourself and what you've done and what you're doing in the world of youth ministry?
Sure. I'm a 28-year youth ministry veteran, so I've been working with students and families for over 28 years as of November. I'm currently just outside Chicago. I've been here about 3 years as a family pastor, still working with students, been overseeing the children's ministry, student ministry, and then also some men's and women's ministry, as well as our church really having an umbrella of student ministry connecting to a lot of things. Beyond the walls of my church, I've been kind of a writer, speaker for about 10 or 15 years now. Last couple of years, we relaunched a website called youthministryhub.com, where we provide youth ministry resources as well as family ministry resources and a lot of other stuff. So just been having a great time working within our church, with outside of our church as well, and also doing some networking even locally, just helping young youth pastors mentor to coach them through the next steps of life.
Awesome. Love it, man. Love it. Love it. So for this episode, you've graciously offered to talk about your top 5 mistakes in almost 30 years of ministry. I know I've made more than I can count, so I'm very interested to see where mine align with yours and where I can speak into that. But we're gonna hit these sort of in the format of what the mistake was, what happened, what you learned during it or from it, and then how you adjusted moving forward. So that way people who are watching and listening, finding themselves here, can maybe have some good insight into
Sure.
how they can move forward in that as well, man. So yeah, let's go through what are those mistakes and how have you learned from them and how have you adjusted?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had to decide with one of the crazy, wild, fun ones that I didn't learn a whole lot from, or some things generally that I just keep making, or
Yeah,
just started making
sure.
over and over again. So
Mhm.
I think early on in youth ministry, my biggest mistakes were going from like 5 to 1. The first one was always trying to act like students.
Okay.
So there were so many stories, and it's almost stereotypical. But early on, and even honestly, I know a lot of young youth pastors and older youth pastors are still trying to pull off the skinny jeans and the deep V-neck and just look ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest mistake over all the years was, early on especially, but even sometimes I slip into it, is trying to be hip and cool, try to dress in a certain way, or think that I'm going to be more relevant. And I have a 18-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son, and they laugh me out of the house when I try to act cool. And but that's honestly what students don't want. I mean, they want authenticity. They want an adult that cares for them. A few years ago, speaking at youth specialties, I talked about the idea of a friend or father, that students really don't need another friend. They have a lot of friends. What they need is those people that are willing to be adults in their life. And that mistake happens over and over again. I can think of times where I've said the wrong slang phrase in front of my students trying to be relevant, and it goes really, really poorly. I get those phone calls from moms and dads saying, you don't understand what that means. And I was like, I Googled it. I do now. But those moments that, when Netflix and Chill just came out, that was my faux pas.
Oh
And
no.
a few other those ones that thankfully my son helps me out a little bit now. But yeah, I mean, it's almost a stereotype, but so many of us make that common mistake of trying to be hip and cool. And to be real, the same thing is trying to find hip and cool leaders. Some of my greatest leaders are well into their senior years. Right now, I have a guy named Paul who's had 2 back surgeries, has a cane, and he is one of our best leaders. He's out there with a cane playing dodgeball. He tries. But the guys absolutely adore him. And he is the farthest thing from hip and cool. And he doesn't even try to be, but he's dedicated to students. He's dedicated in his life. I mean, honestly, he's been a lifelong youth volunteer. I mean, multiple churches, and we're lucky to have him. And so I think that's one of those, there's silly, funny moments that go along with that, but really try to make sure that we are real and authentic is a huge win. And it's a huge mistake when we don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. Yeah, I think, several leaders, both here at the church I work at and then the churches I've been at, the ones that are steadfast are the ones that stand out. And yeah, they can have some athletic flair or be goofy or be that funny guy in the room, but the ones that stand out and that go long term with meaningful impact are the ones that are just there and present. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think with middle schoolers especially, just being able to have the patience to wrangle cats is more needed than trying to be cool.
Oh, for sure.
And I know for young guys especially, like making that jump themselves of like, I still want to be hip and cool, but then as we get older, just as you said, trying to couch it as well, I need to be relevant. But even no matter what the mindset is, we often find ourselves moving away like from where we're trying to go by trying to do that, and it's just the wrong mindset.
They smell a fake a mile
Yeah.
away.
Yes, they
And
do.
honestly, in
Yeah.
that same vein, I think that, over and over again, when I was a young youth pastor, I tried to build relationships with students, become their friend, and not be building relationships with adults. And so I know early on, I mean, my only friendships, my first church as a single youth pastor, were with the teens. I wasn't really building adult relationships,
Mm.
and that was just silly,
Yeah.
I mean, even
Yeah.
though I was similar in some ways their age, a lot of young youth pastors getting out, even honestly, even to some, youth pastors been in there a couple of years, their core relationships, their core friendships are still teenagers. And that is just a huge mistake. I tell people,
Yeah.
you can be friendly without being a friend.
Mm-hmm.
That you can have great relationship with them, but they are not your friend. And honestly, you shouldn't be their friend. You should really be their youth pastor, their mentor, their discipler. And that's what they need. That's what they honestly want.
Yeah.
And that's a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Same mindset as parents who want to try and be friends. Like
Yep.
you need to be different. There's a reason. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. That's number 5.
Yeah.
What's
Number
number
five. Number
4?
four is organization. My biggest mistake early on, and my wife is an organized person, and she rescued me a little bit early on when we got married. But I had some great men in my life that were part of our church that were patient with me and said, "Hey, you're going to go get a day-long organization class because you are a mess. You are not organized, you have no calendar, you're doing things on the spot, you're not preparing well in advance. And honestly, we love you, but your student ministry actually really stinks because of it." And some great elders in my life just said, "Hey, you're gonna go learn how to have a day planner." And that's a huge mistake in youth ministry when you are not organized, when you're waking up on Wednesday morning trying to figure out what we're going to teach on Wednesday night,
Yeah.
when you're planning events, only a month out, all kinds of things like that. I mean, organization is a huge mistake. And in that, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stories where I just was not prepared for what was going to happen. I'm trying to once again wing it on a lesson because I hadn't really prepared, a couple hours before. And so over the years, I've really changed up how I'm going to be organized, sitting down and making a 12-month calendar of all my small events and then 2 or 3 big events that are coming up off the future so my parents can prepare, can get ready, save up money for that big camp, that missions trip. The same thing with teaching. We have an 8-year scope and sequence of teaching. So
Wow.
we know what we're going to teach over 8 years and in what order. We don't have it broken down into like itty bitty little pieces, but the parents know, my pastor knows, all the students know, the student parents know, hey, here's what we're going to cover. And it's almost like a benchmark and a standard that educational model has. We have the same thing in our ministry, and we're doing the same thing now in children's ministry, and we're working that into our family ministry and parenting ministries as well. But it's all about organization. And there's so many times that we just were not prepared for what was going on in ministry. And that's a huge mistake. And once again, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really, really is when we're not organized and we're not showing ourselves to be, put together.
Yeah. Yeah, man. An 8-year scope and sequence. I'm super jealous. We're trying to establish, I think ideally we would want that for sure, but even just trying to get off the ground with a 2 to 3 year sequence and having a new theological discipleship streamlined rotation of what we're going to cover, like we're in the midst of like building that and how we build it into our curriculum and how do we make the jump from children to students and keep that going. Yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
benchmark to hit. And yeah, how what was the time frame from going to learn to use a day planner to getting to where you're able to have that scope and sequence now? Like what were the ups and downs and
Oh, for
valleys and
sure.
peaks of that?
Yeah, I mean, going through different ministries, we realized that we were just not hitting it. I mean, we were hitting certain things over and over again. What changed my model of education and teaching is actually getting a master's in education, not going to get a seminary degree. Because honestly, I want to be a better teacher, not preacher. And
Mm,
that's what I encourage a lot of young youth pastors as well is students, parents, honestly, are not going to sit more than 8-10 minutes. I mean, if
yeah.
you preach at them, you speak at them for 7 to 10 minutes, their attention's done. So I actually have
Mhm.
a 7-minute rule in my ministry where
Yeah.
every 7 minutes we differentiate our instruction. We show a video, we do illustration, we turn,
Hmm.
even on Sunday mornings for our middle schoolers, we do our small groups throughout the lesson,
Yeah.
which is a huge different thing. And part of what I'm putting together for my website is something called 7-Minute Sundays and how to do a Sunday school class in 7-minute segments, which completely changes and has changed how I do things. But honestly, probably about 8 years ago, I got a master's in education, and that changed up how I do scope and sequence teaching, how I approach teaching, like lesson to lesson, but also just organizing. And it's amazing. I tell people it's like years and years ago when I was a younger youth pastor, I decided I was going to do a destination unknown trip back in the day, road rules. And I was not going to tell anybody where we were going, but we were going to pack the students up and we were going to take a 5-day trip with students, not going to tell the parents, not tell the kids, and it's going to be a
Whoa.
surprise. And guess what? No one signed up for the trip because they had no idea where we were going. And the same thing happens to young youth pastors or older youth pastors. Say, hey, I'm going to take your kids on a year-long trip of education, but I'm not going to tell you until every Wednesday morning, when I send out my email where we're going this week.
Mm, yeah.
Same thing. And that was a huge mistake on my part, trying to organize a trip without telling anybody, make it a secret. I thought it'd be cool and this would be
Yeah.
awesome. Kids are going to love it. And it was a great trip. We went on it, but not many students went because they had no idea where we were going or what they were signing up for. And honestly, we do the same thing educationally when we teach, but we don't really prepare in advance.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. That's a really good point. Of the when, yeah, every Wednesday morning you're gonna find out. And yeah, there's just an implicit trust there that you appreciate, but
Yeah.
also we probably take for granted and then abuse and don't really set it up well, where it is kind of like a trip that I want to know where you're going. Well, here you go. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. All right. So 2 down. What's the
All
next thing
right.
that you want to hit?
Professionalism.
Okay.
I was not a professional when I first started. And that's a huge mistake. I have a lot of people who come to my office that are professionals. They look at me and I'm sitting in, cut off shorts and a t-shirt, trying to be hip and cool with my students, saying phrases that are not adult at all, and just coming off really, really poorly. And yeah, I mean, what changed for me a lot, I mean, I had that along and I was kind of changing, but I took a church in Washington, D.C., where 65% of my church worked for the Pentagon. And my senior pastor just came in to me and said, look, if you're going to work here, you got to put on a collared shirt, pants, and, you got to put some shoes on. Realistically, we have men who are walking straight for the Pentagon. They're going to meet with you about their child. They're going to still be in their military uniform. You look like a fool. And, not everybody, you got to do in context, you got in context of who you are, where you're working, where you're serving, but really making sure that you fit within the professional mindset of the area that you're in, making sure you show up on time for meetings. Huge big deal. There's this stereotype of youth pastors that miss meetings, show up late, show up sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
Professionalism is a huge mistake in youth ministry when we don't come off. Our students go to classes and teachers. Our teachers are professionals. They go to, go sign up for sports, and they have these experts in their sport that look professional, that act in a certain way, and parents trust them. An easy way to get trust immediately is to look like you're trusted. You're trustworthy.
Yeah. Okay.
While
Yeah.
we're hanging out playing dodgeball, there's gonna be moments when we just need to look and act professional. We need to look like and act the part of an adult. And that goes back to kind of that, being hip and cool or being trustworthy. And professionalism is a huge big deal. That's where organization comes in. That's where some of those things come in. Um, so I think about early on, I mean, hanging out with my senior pastor, and he's like, hey, we're going to eat. And I showed up, how I'm going to show up. And he's like, I am not going to take you to a restaurant that way. We'll take you to a nice meal, but you don't look the part. You don't look the part of an adult. I look like I'm taking my son out to, Chuck E. Cheese, is what he told me. And he
Yeah.
literally was like, hey, next time we go out, how much you prefer. I want to at least put on something that looks like we're going out somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Being
huge
professional.
mistakes.
Okay.
Yeah, huge
Yeah.
mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely the context of where you're at matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I've had to balance out and figure out over the years. From I showed it to my first youth ministry internship, and I was like in night. I looked like I was showing up for Easter morning, and everyone's kind of looking at me
Yeah.
like, dude, what the heck? But then if you go too far the other way, it's like, no. So you have to be able to bounce that out and realize kind of where you're at. And I know being in Dallas for almost 12 years, there was definitely a pressure to always look nice.
Yeah.
And then whenever we go somewhere else, it's like, oh, I guess people just don't have that like they do in Dallas. So yeah, it's definitely about figuring out where you're at. You definitely want to relate well with your staff, with your leadership, with your parents. And I think that helps you further establish yourself as the adult in your students' lives without being like without being like standoffish. You're just presenting yourself in a way where you can like engage well and be in the role that you should be in.
Right. For
So,
sure.
very
Well,
cool.
that kind of goes to like the second one, which is almost the first one, is parent involvement. I did not want parents involved in my ministry at all.
Ooh,
So for the first 10 years, probably a little bit more, I was like, drop your kids off. I got it. You messed them up, I'll fix them. Kind of mindset. Maybe we have a parent meeting right forward to a trip just so the parents had, felt good about where we're going, what we're doing, obviously. But I had no parents involved in my ministry. I only had young adults and college students. Parents never were allowed to help, were never allowed to chaperone, and I did nothing much to communicate to parents other than the bare minimum. And that was a huge loss. Obviously things have changed, things have shifted. There's a lot of great books out there now, but I realized on my own life, I only get to see these kids a couple hours a week. Parents are with them. So I need to, one, encourage them that they can do the work of discipleship. I want to equip them. Here's some stuff to help you do that. And then I want to continue and empower them to do the work of discipleship on their own. Because that's a huge miss, is when parents aren't involved, parents aren't equipped, and parents aren't really doing discipleship on their own. They're depending purely on you for the work of discipleship. Students going to fail. Student ministry is going to fail. You're going to fail. And honestly, parents are going to fail. And we're going to have students that are walking away, a generation that's walking away from faith, which I think partly is what we see now. There's not parents that have done the work. They don't know how to.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that's a huge, big deal. And as a parent, I get that even more so. But even before I really became a teen parent, I was realizing I'm missing something. And so we have some great parents involved in our ministry. One of our key things that we shoot for is having student-led adult guided ministry, especially the high school side of things, is really allowing those parents to come in. Maybe they're not going to be the best small group leader for whatever reason, but they have skills in cooking. They have skills in creating things. They have skills in organizing. They have skills in worship. And these are people that can coach and mentor my students to lead a ministry. And I can hand off a ton of these aspects of our ministry, which is, it's just a huge thing. But having parents as leaders becomes a safety for your job. And that's a secret. When parents defend you to other parents, you win. And so often we're scared that parents will come in and critique us. But what we have is that when we have parents are with us, they can defend us and actually cheer us on, but also build us up. And we've seen a lot of people come and ministries grow because parents were the ones that were inviting other parents to invite their kids. And that's a huge little secret. It's not much of a secret, but it is a secret that when we have parents involved, it is huge protection for us and our job.
Yeah. It's a multifaceted approach that just screams health, and it's accountability. It's the way it helps you engage with parents and to resource them better, which you made the point of, like, time spent. Whenever I would bring in new upcoming middle school parents and students, we would bring them in the summer, so they have the summer to adjust before starting school. I would lay out, okay, here's the time you're going to spend from now until you graduate high school. And if you come every Sunday morning, you come to every retreat, mission trip, event we do, hours wise, I'm going to have you for about 5 months out of 6 or 7 years. So parents, there's no way that I can spiritually raise your kid my main job is to help you do that, and for me to support you and encourage you to do that well. And yeah, it's the mindset that we have to take. And I was surprised um in my youth ministry classes in seminary um when the professor was really having to talk about that a lot, of like, you can't look at parents as the enemy, or as the people who are like messing up, and you have to come in and fix their mistakes. Yeah, there are going to be exceptions here and there, but by and large, like, your ministry philosophy and perspective has to be championing parents and
Yeah.
wanting that to succeed well, and seeing that as the main sticking point to making your own ministry effective. Because if not, what are students going to remember from their time in youth group? Mainly their relationships. They're not going to
Yeah.
remember, they're going to remember a handful of messages that you ever give. Now, in the moment, when they're in school or whatever else, like, those messages and resources are going to help them. But long term, they're going to remember you being there for them, and the parents and other
Yeah,
people are there with them just as much. So you need to strengthen that as much as you can.
for
So
sure.
that's a really good,
Mhm.
mistake to bring up, that I think a lot of people probably still make, and maybe that mindset they still have of like me versus the parents, which is a very bad, non-biblical, dangerous one to have.
Yeah, I mean, many years ago, a silly story, but many years ago, my wife and I were going to take a group of students on a mission trip, and we didn't want any parents involved. And my mom's like, "I want to go on a mission trip," and I said, "Absolutely not! Like, I don't
Yeah.
want you." So she packed up her car, a tent, followed our 15 passenger van from Cincinnati to southern Tennessee, where we were having our mission trip. She literally pitched a tent across the street from where we were staying and stayed there the whole entire week because she was going to be present. That's how much she desired to be involved in our ministry, how much she desired to be part of our kids' lives. And we completely tried to blow her off. And she just literally took a week off of work, packed up, and camped out. And eventually I just said, "Hey, come across the street, hang out with us. You're here." And now, I mean, we're friends. I mean, her daughter and I are great, still great friends. We still have connection with them. And she became a huge fan of ours because I willing to accept, "Hey, you know what? I'm wrong. You should have came along. I should have brought you on as a leader." I got to know her as a person. She came off a little strong, obviously, of course. But now we look back and we're like, all right, we really missed it. We could have had her as a leader to start off with, instead of making her, literally stalk us on a mission
Yeah.
trip because we thought we didn't need her or a parent to be involved. And it
Yeah.
was a huge thing. We still look back, we laugh about it. But yeah, you just miss those moments in ministry.
Yeah. That's a great story. That's a really cool, yeah, especially the redemptive part. But even without that,
Yep.
a parent just having the gall to like pack up and camp across the street, like, dang, wow, it's like standoff. But that's awesome.
Wow. Yeah.
All right, man. So 4 down. What did you leave for the number one mistake?
Last thing is not taking care of myself.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
up till quite a few years ago, I had a 12 cup pot of coffee in my corner that I would drink every day. I was
Every
drinking
day.
I was drinking a lot of caffeine, trying to stay awake, try to keep up with my schedule. I would overschedule myself. I would push it hard. I wasn't sleeping right. I wasn't eating right. Um, yeah, I mean, and so many of us are pounding the Red Bull, pounding the Monster, trying to keep up with schedules that are just not workable. And we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to do it. And I know early on, I mean, when I first got married, before we had kids, I was working 60, 65 hours a week. And there's no reason. If you have great volunteers, you have parents involved, you're communicating, you're organized, you're professional, you really can do a 44, 45-hour week and still get everything done, walk away and feel good about it. But you're empowering. You need to empower leaders. And so many of us are not taking care of ourselves. We're not eating right. The leftover 2-day-old leftover pizza in our, mini fridge in our corner, drinking way too much caffeine, not working out, not taking care of ourselves. That's a huge loss. And I was not in a healthy place. And I talked to all young youth pastors and older youth pastors, people my age who are burning out. And I'm like, what is going on? And I start hearing about their lifestyle, but also even spiritual soul care. Hey, I'm in the Bible all the time, but are you in the Bible for yourself? I know you're prepping a lesson, but are you spiritually healthy? Are you taking a day off a week? Way back when I started changing this, I said, no, I am, especially now when I started having kids, I will take off 2 days a week. Friday and Saturday will be my weekend, and I'm going to work a 5-day work week. I'll work 40 hours and I'll tithe the 4 more, because that's what I ask of my volunteers. We want a time, talent, and treasure tithe. So we're asking you for 4 hours of your week to tithe toward our ministry or a ministry of our church. And I want to live the same way. And so probably last 10 years, I've made a effort, and I've also made a commitment to my family and my wife that I will work a 44-hour work week. Obviously there's exceptions, camps, mission trips, things like that, but the average week, and I'm going to try to be home for dinner every single day of the week. I'm going to eat healthy as much as I can in youth ministry, but really make sure that I'm cutting back on the non-healthy stuff, especially caffeine. So I am a caffeine addict in recovery always, but really honestly, it is not the best person you need to be in ministry when you're not taking care of yourself. You cannot pour out of an empty cup.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah, man. That's a really big one.
Coffee analogy, but yeah.
Yeah. That's a really big one. That's definitely me. My diet's horrible. I haven't worked out since my son was like 3 months old. So that's a really good message to send out. And I think you have to do it in baby steps, because I know all the influencers or Instagrammers or whatever, it's like, hey, just do this all of a sudden and completely change your lifestyle on Monday. No, you have to you have to, whether it's like one of those apps of like couch potato to 5K or whatever, like you have to like be able to, whatever you do spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, I would also throw in there, find a counselor.
Absolutely.
You need to have, whether it's a trusted friend or a professional, if you can swing it, and see if your church has ministry budget money for it. If you can't, because I know it can be expensive, like that personally for me saved my ministry. I'm not sure I'd still be in ministry if it wasn't for counseling. So and
networking is huge.
Networking is big. Oh, I love networking. I'm looking to fire another network up back here that was in the area a long time ago and has been dormant. And so a pastor across town is working with me, and we're gonna try and fire that back up. So
free group therapy. It's free group therapy. We
Mm-hmm.
joke about it, but it really, really is. We have one here locally. My wife and I were sat on the National Council for National Network for Youth Ministry for about 3-4 years ago. And wherever we go, if there's not one happening, we try to get one going. But networking is free, free group therapy. It really is. And mentors are there. We try to really build mentorship into our networks and things like that. But a counselor and a mentor. Somebody in ministry that willing to like be real with you, and they're not doing it because they're getting paid. And so we've just found some really great older men and women in our life that have breathed life into us, told us that we need to get organized, get professional, stop acting like kids, and then stay healthy. I mean, that's where my mentor, who just passed away about a year ago, just was always on me. Like, you gotta, this is the things, stuff that I didn't listen to, that I should have, and things that, he really changed my ministry because of just his mentorship, his willingness to kind of stay with it with me. And, he was 65 years old when he passed away, and he was still a youth pastor. He left youth ministry, went back into youth ministry. He was a youth pastor at a small church where his son was the senior pastor. Wow. And so huge hero of my life. And, but also was always willing to pick up the phone and say, all right, I'm gonna be real with you. And that's huge. You need to find someone like that in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I love that. I love that. Well, Dan, thank you for your time, man. Give us your best 60-second plug for Youth Ministry Hub.
Youthministryhub.com is that it's been around for a few years now. We have games. We have one night resources, which is a all-inclusive package, includes everything for one night of youth ministry. 2 games, all the presentation, everything else. And then right now, as we just mentioned, we're doing a lot of family ministry stuff. So we have something called Faith at Home. It's a 2-page. One page is how to disciple your child. Second page is an activity to do discipleship at home with your child. And then coming soon is the 7-Minute Sunday, which is a updated version of Sunday School that really does it in 7-minute segments. and gives you an opportunity to really be effective in your Sunday school class. And then we try to post. I mean, we post 5 days out of 7. So there's always something on our, what we call our blog, which is just a variety of resources, updates, some humor, guest posts, all kinds of things are on there every single day. So that's my quick plug.
That's awesome, man. That's great. I'll put the link to that in the show notes and the YouTube description.
Great.
But Dan, thanks so much, man. Thanks for making it a difference in leaders' lives and students' lives. Keep rocking, and thanks again for your time, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, that does it for today's podcast episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can have a heads up about when we have new content. Also, if you ever listen to podcasts in the car or somewhere else, please follow us on your podcast player of choice. We are on every single one of them. If you haven't already, please check out our website, youthministrymaverick.com. There you can see a comprehensive list of our guests, their bio information, a list of ministries that can help you in your own ministry, some articles I've written, and a store where you can get some podcast merchandise. Also, we have a big ask. If you would go and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, not just a rating, but a review, take a screenshot of it and send it to me on social media. And in return, I will write you a thank you card and send you some podcast merchandise that you can't buy on the store. Well, that does it. We'll catch you next time. Adios.